Well, the bad news is draft season is over. The good news is the real season is here. So it's time to start setting your lineups, but also hitting the waiver wire. Yeah, I know nothing's happened yet, but still, it's never too early to be looking ahead. Maybe there's somebody that you didn't draft and you should have, or maybe you've already got the injury bug biting you. Look, whatever it is, you can never be too proactive. So here's some of the best waiver wire pickups after the draft as the season gets started. All right, let's start with hitters first. And we got to start with a guy who's getting all sorts of buzz, not just the last couple of weeks because of what he's done in spring, but the fact that Cam Smith has made the opening day roster for the Astros. Nobody saw that coming, not because of anything having to do with his talent or ability, but the fact that he was just drafted last year. Sorry, the 14th overall pick, the 2024 draft, and he's already in the majors because he's been lighting up in spring. I had a feeling Smith would make his way into the outfield for Houston at some point because I really didn't see the combination of Jake Myers, Chas McCormick really holding down those jobs all season long. And it didn't take long because Cam Smith, again, this spring hitting 342 with 4 home runs and 11 RBIs. And he also brings a lot of athleticism to that position. Not really a natural outfielder as it is. He's a third baseman who's now getting a shot in right field because that's where the need is. Just got to find a way to get this guy's bat in the lineup, and they're doing that. Now, I'm going to say this with pretty much every hitter that I'm going to recommend on this waiver wire video. A lot of them are young players that made the cut, unproven guys, which is why they weren't drafted in most leagues. And you've got to take it with a grain of salt what they did in spring training because it's spring training, yada, yada. Now, Smith has a ton of raw power. He's a bigger guy, 6'3", about 220. And honestly, I'm getting a little bit of Jay Buhner vibes for those who were watching the game for a while. If you remember Jay Buhner, who was a teammate of Junior in Seattle, he was the right-handed power to Griffey's left-handed power. And now he's not exactly the same type of hitter, and he's a little more athletic and got some speed, but still, he's got a very similar stroke. And I mean, does he have eventually 40 homer upside? Who knows? That's not happening this year, though. Trust me, it is not happening this year. But 20-something home runs and a decent batting average, yeah, I'll take it. Now, for leagues that drafted later, just the past week or so, especially this past weekend, the final one before opening day, Smith was getting taken, and I saw him go higher and higher, the later it got. So he's still out there, but only in about 2/3 of leagues. And I mean, again, this is no guarantee. Sometimes spring hype disappears, but I mean, take a chance. Now, if you want speed, all right, another buzzy name, Victor Scott, is going to be the starting center fielder for the Cardinals. Now, Scott's a guy I was all over last year, and it didn't work out. This guy who has 80 grade speed. I mean, he's going to be one of the fastest players in the majors. Again, let's hope that this time it goes a lot better because he could not hit for anything last season. Over 155 plate appearances, hit for a 179 average, and of course, you can't steal bases or score runs when you're never on base. But he has flipped the script big time in the spring, 349, and that includes not only 5 steals, but 4 home runs. Now, that's a little surprising because he has never, even in the minors, over a full season, hit double-digit home runs. I mean, this is not a power bat, but look, there's a little bit of pop there. Let's just ignore that. Let's not count on the home runs. Let's focus on the fact that you could be looking at a major source of steals. And, kind of like Victor Robles last year was a midseason savior for somebody you could just scoop up off waivers and get a bunch of steals. And that's what Victor Scott might be, that you can do this in week 1. And I probably don't have to say it, but I'll say it again. Standard disclaimer, just because he hit in the spring doesn't mean he will in the majors. Be ready to cut bait, but, keep your hopes up that maybe the ceiling is finally going to get reached. Only thing with Scott I don't love is the fact that right now slated to hit near the bottom of the order, probably hitting 8th, whereas Mason Wynn, another speedy guy who can hit for average as well, is hitting 9th. I really wish the Cardinals will put their fastest guys at the top of the order. I mean, I get we want to see that they can hit for average first, so that's fine, but do we really need like Lars Nootbaar and Brendan Donovan hitting in the top third of the order? I don't think so. All right, some more rookie hype, and this is a prospect that pretty much everybody knows, Christian Campbell for the Red Sox. He made the opening roster even though he did not have a good spring. And that's what's both most surprising, but also, I guess, encouraging because the Red Sox didn't just look at that output. They're looking at readiness, and they feel he is ready. And Von Grissom was already sent down about a week ago, so he's not the guy at second base. Now, they do still have David Hamilton, and so this is where things get a little tricky. Just because he's on the roster doesn't mean he's going to be playing every day or really much at all. It could be, kind of a part time thing, just get his feet wet. And, you can't count on Campbell as your second base or middle infielder just yet. And even if he does start, again, let's see, because like I said, his spring numbers were not that good. Wound up with a 167 average, just one homer and two RBIs, but also 18 strikeouts in 59 plate appearances. That's a 30% K rate. Let's see what Campbell does first. Again, this is a guy that you can stash at the end of your bench and wait and see. We might need to take kind of the long view here, but at the same time, if he does start getting hot in the first couple of weeks of the season, you probably won't be able to pick him up then because somebody else will have already done it. Now, here's a prospect you just grab right now, one that you might not have known unless you watched my top 25 prospects for redraft video a couple weeks back. Talk about guys who can make an impact right now, and Alan Rodin for Toronto is going to be able to do that because he's made the opening day roster and he might be the starting left fielder. He had an amazing spring, 407 batting average, couple of home runs, but more walks than strikeouts, which is not surprising for him because that's his track record throughout the minors. Very low strikeout rate, walks a ton. He's got a great eye, of course, hitting for average. He's got modest power. He's not a power hitter. He's obviously more of a contact hitter, but he does have some pop. So I could see him getting into the teens in terms of home runs if he's in that lineup every day. But again, these days, it's harder to catch up on batting average than home runs. So this might even be more valuable than you expect. And then a surprising one. I don't think anybody really expected the Rockies to trade Nolan Jones back to Cleveland right before the season started, but they did it. Now, normally you might think, well, there's got to be something going on with Nolan Jones, right? They just didn't like what they saw last year, which why would you? Because he was bad and then he was hurt and maybe didn't impress them enough this spring. But being that it's the Rockies, maybe we'll actually second guess this a little bit and think that they're just a terrible franchise. This also seems like a short-sighted move because what they did is they traded Jones just to get Tyler Freeman in return. And this seems like a reaction to the fact that Thairo Estrada, who's going to be the starting second baseman, is out for 6 to 8 weeks, I think it is. And so they're just trading away one of their potential young stars to get a fill-in for second base. Well, the more I look at it, Tyler Freeman doesn't jump off the page for you, especially in fantasy, but this might have been a good move. Of course, that's assuming Nolan Jones doesn't go back to being a monster like he was at the end of 2023. And sure, Tyler Freeman is going to be the second baseman right now for Colorado. And he can also play some shortstop. He can play in the outfield. This is going to be a versatile player for them in the field, and actually he's not too bad with the bat. Last year his batting average wasn't anything great, but he chipped in 7 home runs and 11 steals across 383 plate appearances. So you think about that, maybe if we're being optimistic and we squint real hard, we could see 2020 over a full season if he accumulates that many plate appearances. That's possible in Colorado. Sure, why can't that power output jump up? And he must have done enough to impress the Rockies because he's hitting 298 this spring. And again, he brings a little bit of everything to the plate and to the field. So this might wind up looking like a better real life pick. That's assuming that it actually winds up being a good trade for them. But Tyler Freeman could still wind up being a valuable part of their team. So I think this is a guy that is very similar for your fantasy roster. He's going to be able to qualify at shortstop, at outfield right now, and he's pretty soon going to add second base eligibility. Gives you a little power, a little speed, and you know what? If he can hit in Colorado the way most people can, not bad for your average either. All right, now pitchers. Might as well start with the number one pitching prospect that everybody knows about. Jackson Jobe might not be floating out there in a lot of leagues, but he was drafted in just over half. So, some shallower leagues, maybe he hasn't been. I understand maybe we want to wait and see what he actually looks like, but if you wait too long, you're not going to get a hold of the guy who I don't think it's extreme to say could be this year's Paul Skeens. Look, he's been a top pitching prospect for the last couple of years, and he already had a very nice 4-pitch mix. And as I talked about, in my prospect video, he's adding not one but two more pitches this offseason to give him even filthier stuff. Now, the only thing is this spring, although the results have been pretty good, we haven't seen it result in a lot of Ks. And so that is just a matter of coming with experience, learning how to sequence your pitches effectively, knowing what to use in two strike counts. I broke that down in detail also when I spoke with Matt Morris from Scout the Stat Line about prospects, and he agreed that Job will get there, just a matter of how long does it take. Now, I've also got to warn you, if you did draft Job or you're thinking about picking him up, fine, do it. Absolutely. I've taken him already in a couple of leagues, and I might pick him up if I have the chance. But his first game might not be one where you want him in your actual lineup because right now scheduled to be a road start against the Dodgers. Keep in mind, for any of these late pitchers or young pitchers that you have drafted, you don't have to start them every time that they start, especially their first time out. That goes for a couple more rookie pitchers I'm going to talk about, but first, let's talk about Dustin May, who is now the fifth starter for the Dodgers. Now, it's funny because you should just think automatically, reflexively, even Dodgers pitchers, great. But if you paid attention last year, played fantasy, you're going to think Dodgers pitchers, oh no. Because every one of them has gotten hurt, and pretty much every guy they have in the rotation now either has been injured very recently or is on the verge of it. Okay, I shouldn't say that. I mean, hopefully none of them actually get injured, but Dustin May is definitely an example of that. I mean, he hadn't pitched at all last year because so many injuries, including some weird ones. But look, I broke him down not too long ago as well. We already know the ratios should be good, right? That's not really even a concern. The strikeout rate will be average, right? And then the injury history is bad. So with the potential reward, there is some risk, but again, this goes for any pitcher, not just the ones in the Dodgers staff. But just like with Job, I want to play the waiting game with May, not because he's a new pitcher or anything like that, but he is scheduled to face the Braves in his first time out, so I might want to give it one turn before he's in my lineup. And of course, the Dodgers are not the only juggernaut that has had injury problems in the rotation. The Yankees, no Garrett Cole, no Luis Gill, and so that means enter Will Warren. Will Warren is an interesting name. This guy that you thought might make an impact last year, but he really took a step backwards in terms of effectiveness. His numbers in AAA were not very good, and then he did get a cup of coffee with the Yanks last year, and it was worse. Over 22 and two-thirds innings, a 10.32 ERA, a 1.9 whip. He did get 29 strikeouts in those 22 innings, so I guess there's one positive, and, supposedly from a pitch level quality aspect, he really didn't do much worse, although the results certainly look that way. But look, there was no major injury here. There is no overlying cause for concern. And obviously, he looked good enough that the Yankees are giving him that shot right now. So I'm definitely taking a wait and see approach with Will Warren. I will stash him where I have room. I'm going to keep more of a close eye on Warren as opposed to outright taking him, although I did draft him just a couple days ago in the Sports Ethos industry draft. But that was a pretty deep league. And look, I'm just going to speculate if I can. I don't want to force him onto my roster just yet. But keep an eye because Warren does have good stuff. He's got a really good slider and, of course, a great chance to earn wins with the Yankees. But let's see how he looks maybe his first 2 or 3 times out. Hey, if we're lucky, then maybe he is this year's Luis Gill. Boston also having all sorts of trouble keeping their starting pitchers healthy. So that means Richard Fitz has earned a spot, and he's not even the 5th starter, he's the 4th. Now, Fitz, unlike Warren, did look really good in his cup of coffee last year. In fact, he posted a 1.74 ERA, a 1.26 whip in 4 starts. But conversely, the one area he could improve on is generating more whiffs at the major league level. So he's focused on that. He's relying less on the fastball, more on the slider and his other pitches at the major league level. So we'll see how that plays. Solid spring. And you know what? This is a guy who, although he doesn't necessarily have the makeup to be a long-term starter necessarily, thought actually he was going to be a bullpen arm, honestly. But if they can get 5, maybe 6 innings out of him per start, that should be good enough. If you're in a quality starts league, I might be a little more skeptical, but Fitz has a chance to impress, so let's see if he does it. And if you think it's too early to start speculating on closers, of course you're wrong because it's never too early. We already have a mess in Cincinnati because Alexi Diaz, incumbent, is hurt, and it didn't really look like he wanted the job anyways, as bad as he was, but let's chalk that up to injury, sure, to be generous. So who's going to be the Reds closer right now? No, this is the funny thing because the guy who's getting added a lot and getting a lot of the hype is Graham Ashcraft, converted starter. But, I think about that and on one hand it makes sense, but on the other hand it doesn't because Graham Ashcraft has zero experience in the late innings. He's also a guy who has a very low strikeout rate. So even if he does wind up being the guy they put out there on ninth, am I getting enough, in terms of potential reward versus risk in fantasy? And they also have Emilio Pagan, who does have some experience closing games, a little bit here and there. He's more of an experienced pitcher. I mean, he just makes more sense. So I don't want to really sway you either way because I can't honestly say I know who's going to be closing games for the Reds. It could be somebody else as well. But if I had to pick, and I'm really desperate for saves before the season even starts, I'm going to put my money right now on Pagan, but keep an eye on Ashcraft just in case. We're going to keep staying ahead of the game, making those moves before anybody else even expects it. So keep it locked here all season long for weekly waiver wire videos, live streams, and more. And join us on opening day, the evening, so that we can break down what has happened and overreact to everything on one of the greatest days of the year.